I am going to call this meeting, this April meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Task Force to order at 1:10 p.m. We now have a quorum, and we'll start with, I don't think we have any public comments this time, do we?
No.
No? Okay. So we're going to go right into the approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes here that we have to approve. And I thought that if I don't hear any corrections or changes, that we'll just go ahead and have a motion to approve all 3 of them at the same time. I don't know if you all have had a chance to look at them, but if no one offers up any suggestions for corrections or changes, could I have a motion of approval for all 3 sets of minutes?
I'll make a motion. It's Rita.
Thank you, Rita. And this would be for the February 12th, 2021, February 19th, 2021, and March 12th, 2021 minutes. Is there a second to Rita's motion? Was someone second?
Second, this is Michael.
Michael, thank you so much. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Do I hear any opposed? Hearing no opposed, all 3 sets of minutes are approved as submitted. And thank you all. I did want to make one mention of one item. In the March meeting, Maria asked if August would be our last task force meeting. And I said yes. And that was the correct answer at the time. But subsequent to that, Chairman Narvaez and the ENVS committee asked if we would continue on and have a September meeting so that we would be still meeting in September, and then that would be our last month. So I did want the task force to know that. I don't know if Maria is on, but we will get this into the minutes for this meeting so that everybody on the task force knows that our last meeting will be in September and not August. So with that, we're going to move to Susan, who's going to give us 2 updates, one on the Environmental Commission and one on the Urban Forest Master Plan.
Well, and I've got Joey online, and so he's going to do a truthiness check on the Urban Forest Master Plan. But first of all, I wanted to let you all know that at the last ENVS committee meeting, the committee unanimously voted to move forward the ordinance that was developed based on your input and actually direction. They made no changes. And so we did a very quick late agenda item effort. It is on the agenda for full council vote on the 28th of August. I'm not August, April, sorry. And right now it's just like what you had told us you wanted us to do. It is 15 voting members with both environmental and neighborhood expertise. 2 members should have public health background. And then there is a technical panel of 8 experts that are non-voting, which means they can be from anywhere. And then we also did a standing committee for environmental health so that we're addressing that within the umbrella of the Environmental Commission. So that's going to be on the agenda on the 28th. I'm very excited about that. The other thing I wanted to follow up with you on is that the city departments that work with trees have been working very hard at looking at the timeline for implementation on the Urban Forest Master Plan. The latest I have heard is we are presenting at our executive leadership team meeting on Tuesday. Those recommendations with the plan of bringing it back to the committee probably by memorandum on the 3rd and to a May council meeting. Joey, did I get that part of it? Is that the current plan or has it changed?
Accurate.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of let you all know what was going on with that as well. And if you have
Susan,
questions,
excuse me, Susan, did you mean it would go back to the ENVS committee?
As a memo, because we have a pretty full agenda on the 3rd. with the intent of putting it on a voting agenda later in the month. And so I'm working on that agenda and resolution right now.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Sue, it's Michael. Is there anything we need to do in support of that, or we've done our work and we just need to let it get through the process?
You may want to listen in on the May 3rd meeting and see how that goes. I can't lobby, but if you feel so moved to let your friendly neighborhood council members know your desires relative to that plan, it would likely be helpful.
And I'd like to mention that the Urban Forest Advisory Committee also looked over the master plan at their last meeting. And they made a series of recommendations that we forwarded it to you with the other materials for this meeting, just so you could see what their set of recommendations were. And like us, they advised that they thought it would be a good idea to have a centralized forestry department rather than have it scattered among a number of different departments. So, and they made a number of recommendations besides that one also. So you may want to take a look at that and see how it jibed with what the recommendations were from our meeting after we were briefed on it. So any more on those, Susan?
No.
Okay. All right. So are there any questions for Sue on either one of those items, the Environmental Commission and the Urban Forest Master Plan? I just want to say again, I know I've said it before, but I think this task force did great work on developing that Environmental Commission, and to have it go through Council Committee with no changes and no recommendations for change from what we presented, thought was really good work on the task force's part. So thank you all very much for doing that. That was a big part of why we were formed as a task force. And so to have that part of it done and done on time was very important and greatly appreciated by Chairman Narvaez and the committee members from the council. So, okay, let's go on to our next item, which is a presentation on local solid waste management and their plan update from Cliff Gillespie, who's the Assistant Director of Sanitation Services, together with Scott Pasternak, who is a consultant with Burns McDonnell.
Well, good afternoon, Ms. Grayson and task force members. Again, my name is Cliff Gillespie, and I'm an interim assistant director with the Department of Sanitation. For anyone that may not be familiar with our department, sanitation provides solid waste collection and disposal services for all single family and duplex homes in Dallas and certain other apartments, condos, and commercial businesses, which is approximately 250,000 collection points for weekly garbage and recycling collection and monthly brush and bulky item pickup. We also operate 3 transfer stations as well as McComas Bluff landfill. So thanks for having us here to speak with you today about the decennial update to the city's local solid waste management plan, sometimes referred to as the Zero Waste Plan. Joining me today is Tim Oliver, Interim Director of Sanitation, and Scott Pasternak with Burns & McDonnell, the consulting firm assisting us with this project. I'm going to turn it over to Scott in just a moment. I just wanted to first quickly give you an introduction to what a local solid waste management plan is and a little background on our existing plan. Local solid waste management plans are required by the Texas Health and Safety Code at both the regional and local levels, and that code provides for the content and approval requirements of those plans. Their purpose is to identify current and future solid waste management needs, evaluate program and technical options for meeting those needs, and to define a course of action for future waste generated by the city. The current plan was developed in 2011 and adopted by the City Council in February of 2013. It's our goal to update the policies and programs in the plan based on what we've learned over the last decade, and to bring the plan in alignment with CCAP, and to do so with as much stakeholder and community feedback as possible, with particular attention to those harder to reach communities. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott for the presentation, and we look forward to your questions afterwards. Scott, I'll pull up the presentation on my end here.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I can provide a brief introduction of myself and our company. So thanks for that introduction. And Ms. Grayson and members of the task force, thank you so much for providing this opportunity for us to provide an initial update of our progress to date. As Cliff mentioned, to update this solid waste management plan for the city of Dallas. So my background is that I've been in the solid waste and recycling consulting field for going on about 20 years. And then prior to that, worked as a solid waste, excuse me, and recycling planner at the TCEQ. But over the past 20 years, my work has focused exclusively on working with cities and other public sector clients especially here in Texas, but across the country on their solid waste, resource recovery, and planning types of issues. A few years ago, our firm, Burns & McDonnell, led the statewide study on the economic impacts of recycling for the TCEQ. We're presently working on the recycling market development plan, again, at the state level. So really working collaboratively at the state, regional, and local levels is where we provide consulting services to our clients. And Burns & McDonnell is the firm that I work for, where I've been now for going on 7+ years. We do have offices in both Dallas and Fort Worth, and are a company that's been in business for more than 120 years. So with that said, I'll jump into the discussion. Sorry, excuse me. I think these springtime allergies are finally getting to me. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I'm also joined today by Eric Weiss with Burns & McDonnell. So Eric and I are both available to answer any questions that you all may have for us. And so today we just wanted to provide a brief update to give you an overview of the local solid waste management plan update, to provide some initial perspective on what the future strategic direction may entail based on the work that we're doing, to give you an overview of the planning process to update the plan. As Cliff just mentioned, we do want to make sure that the content of this plan supports the CCAP solid waste related goals. So we'll talk about that briefly. Stakeholder engagement is also a key part of this planning effort. So we'll provide you all with an overview of the work that's happening there, and then to give you a sense of what our schedule looks like for the remainder of this year, and at what points in time we'll be coming back to your group, as well as other presentations that would be planned for at the city council level. So with that, Cliff, if we could please go to this slide. So thank you. So I think a lot of this is just shows graphically what Cliff just mentioned, to where on the far right-hand side, for us to develop this plan, I think it's important for us to recognize and evaluate and build from prior planning efforts by the city of Dallas, starting with on the left-hand side. We're calling it the 2011 Zero Waste or Local Solid Waste Management Plan. It was actually formally adopted in February of 2013, and that included multiple initiatives that were focused on increasing diversion. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're also referencing and looking to build on the CCAP and its 9 solid waste goals. And then also we are leveraging and building from and reviewing stakeholder engagement efforts that were completed as a part of CCAP, so that we can hit the ground running in terms of understanding what some of those key issues are. So when it comes time to the update of this plan for 2021, we are taking an in-depth evaluation of the goals from the 2011 plan. And because this is going to be an update and where we've talked with the city about having, in this case, 10 years, but in the future, maybe it's on a every 5 or 10 year basis, but to really, with the intent of the plan being updated more frequently, the whole idea is to still maintain a long-term focus, but more importantly, to really figure out what are going to be the important strategies and recommendations to be implemented on the near-term basis, which will be somewhere in the ballpark of about a 5-year planning period. So next slide, please. From a future strategic direction perspective, as Cliff described it, this was the 2011 plan was developed as a zero waste plan. And so I think it's really important that the city kind of thinks through what does zero waste really mean, because it's very much an evolving term. And the way that we like to communicate that with groups is to say that zero waste is oftentimes a philosophy, and the actual numbers of what it means can vary from one community to community. But I think it's really important to recognize that it's really important for communities to have visionary goals. And so a lot of cities that do have zero waste, that means that that's the long-term vision of where they want to get to. Now, that doesn't mean that when we do this plan update that the city of Dallas necessarily has to be continue to be committed to zero waste, but you certainly may have that preference, and that's part of what the planning process will entail. But a number of other large cities in Texas have faced similar challenges to either meet goals that they have set or may have looked to adjust some of their high recycling rate goals. And so again, we're going, actually, Cliff, just one more moment on this slide. So a key part of this planning update is to just evaluate the progress that the city has made, and then to really look at what are the goals that should be set over the course of the next few years in terms of increasing diversion, and then also to figure out what should be that longer term strategic direction. And what's shown on the bottom of this slide are the goals that were included in the 2011 plan, which called for reaching a 40% recycling rate in 2020, and then increasing that to 60% in 2040, and then to reach zero waste in 2060. And so all that we're suggesting is that as part of this update, we will be evaluating where the city is now, and then where the city may be able to strive to reach over the next few years while deciding whether to maintain a zero waste perspective from a long-term vision. So this next slide communicates what our planning process is. And so where we are now is the first box on the left-hand side, which is our evaluation of the existing system, where we are reviewing those prior studies that we just referenced. We're spending time, excuse me, out in the field with your collection routes at your various types of facilities, and then evaluating your waste generation projections, and again, evaluating facilities. And then from there, moving from left to right, we will then look to establish the plan objectives. So really to figure out where do you want to go in the future, and then from there to identify alternatives and to evaluate options, and then to come back and to conduct strategy workshops with the city. And then ultimately, the local solid waste management plan will include an implementation plan, as well as a schedule for that. And then the bottom part of this slide communicates that there will be pretty extensive and meaningful stakeholder engagement throughout the course of the planning process, and we'll show the highlights of that in a few slides. So next, please, Cliff. So again, we referenced supporting the CCAP related goal slide. Simply communicates what each of those solid waste related goals are. So we won't touch on each and every one of these right now, but we did want to mention that they're very much at the front of our minds in terms of making sure that each one of these is addressed as a part of this ongoing planning effort. So next slide. So from a stakeholder engagement perspective, we have recently further collaborated with sanitation leadership to put together a detailed stakeholder engagement plan. And the first step of that is going to be to develop what we describe as a stakeholder engagement toolkit. So this will essentially include all the key information that will be included for other aspects of the stakeholder engagement efforts. So this will be information that can be utilized for the city's website focused on the plan. And then when we do other activities, be it developing the online surveys or when we go to look to have community meetings and events, we'll be able to reference this toolkit as it'll have key or core information related to the local solid waste management plan update. We will be conducting an online survey with questions focused on different sectors such as single family, multifamily, and commercial. We will also be participating in community meetings and events. These events we're looking to have late summer or into the fall so that we can hopefully get back to more in-person meetings, but our team can definitely be flexible in terms of whether those are done virtually or in person. And the whole idea there is, and I think this is consistent with some of the meetings that were done during the CCAP process, would be to identify meetings that are hopefully already taking place that a brief discussion on the local solid waste management plan can become a part of those meetings. And then there are going to be multiple task force and city council presentations throughout the process. And in addition, we will be interviewing various stakeholders, and I think we definitely are in the process of reaching out to underrepresented communities. So if anyone on the task force has any recommendations there as far as specific stakeholders, be interested to hear your thoughts on that front. So on the next slide, this just gives you an overall key tasks that we'll be working on in our overall schedule. This is marked as a draft, just in case anything would happen. I think we should be in pretty good shape as far as the schedule, but I probably would have said the same thing last February, and then COVID came along and had some impacts on various things schedule-wise, but hopefully we've all had that behind us now. So if we look at where we are today in terms of the springtime, this is where we are doing a lot of the field work, site visits and analysis, starting with really today, stakeholder engagement process, but also starting to build out the online survey. And then you'll see on the bottom part of this are where we have identified the various city council, task force, and subcommittee presentations and how those will occur from a timing perspective. And I think we'll have a certain degree of flexibility to work with the city on preferred timeframes for those various meetings and presentations. And then as we move into the summertime, there will specifically be evaluating the effectiveness of the 2011 implementation strategies with city staff. And then from there, again, collaborating with the city to establish the goals and objectives for this update. And then once we understand what those goals and objectives are, to then outline what will be the various alternatives and strategies that could be implemented to help the city achieve those goals. And then from there to develop a 5-year implementation plan, which will also include what the costs associated with those programmatic changes will be. And so we are looking to be able to present this for consideration by the city council sometime toward the end of this year. So with that wraps up what we wanted to communicate as far as the presentation, but we would certainly be happy to answer any questions that you may have for us.
So committee members or task force members, do you have any questions for Scott or for Cliff?
Hi, this is Alan. How are you doing?
Alan, hi.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. I have a question with regard to, and it's more related to the actual sourcing for and removal for and use of some of the recycled materials. How are the markets doing with regard to the actual purchasing or taking the materials off our hands?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can certainly answer that, but if anybody from the city wants to chime in, certainly fine. So your timing of that question is actually pretty positive right now. The markets have been an immense challenge over the last several years. I mean, they've been about as bad as I've ever seen them in my 20+ year career. But the good news is that we have seen uh, a real strengthening and rebounding starting toward the end of 2020 and continuing into 2021 across a variety of material type. Uh,
Mhm.
for a number of years, for the last several years, it's really been the paper products that have taken a significant hit, especially mixed paper, which is the largest component of the analysis recycling stream. But we're starting to see some price strengthening there, and then also rebounding on the cardboard side as well. So overall, going in the right direction. Now, these materials are commodities, so there's certainly no guarantee as far as how long that will continue. But I am just personally hopeful that you know, hopefully what's happening as far as the economic rebound that will see corresponding benefits on recycling markets as well.
I'd like to follow up with that, given what you're seeing, because my question has to do with I want to see this happen. I want to see more collection and use of these materials and get moved towards zero. But is there anything we could do maybe as a CPAC to encourage incubating industries that might be able to use more of these materials? Because reality is we can collect all the materials we want to, but we've got to really source and find how to use this. I know there's technologies that can reuse plastics, and we've got to really line up. I think half the task of, rather than being on the collection side, we've got to have let's say an incentivizing, not incentivizing, but a really a fact finding group to go ahead and make sure that we are sourcing and allowing a development of an industry that can use this material aggressively and source it, so that when we collect it, we can actually get it someplace so it doesn't end up in some landfill in China or someplace
Right.
away from us. I just would like to see that actually use it. And I know that I've seen plastic bags being developed in a petrochemical in diesel to even use it for fuel or whatever.
Mhm.
I know that there are industries. I know one industry is using a lot of recycled plastics to do these road grid systems, to use rock that's a permeable paving system that they're based out of Houston. And I just think that we've just got to find sources and say, let's find, for instance, let's find a manufacturer that's actually needing it, and maybe we can go direct to them rather than getting them through a broker. And so that we directly are aggressively finding sources for the materials that we're collecting. And I'll end with that. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I will mention that our firm is developing for the state of Texas a recycling market development plan. And part of that will include recommendations that could be considered by cities like Dallas.
Mhm.
And so that plan is scheduled to be completed over this summer. So it's almost perfect timing to then help inform what could be applicable for the city of Dallas's plan update.
Yeah, we don't need another shingle mountain of plastics that we can't get rid of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, there will. We understand that.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Alan. Ariman?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask about not the recycling side, but the waste production side, because my understanding is, especially plastic, is not infinitely recyclable. It can only be recycled 1 or 2 times. And certainly, I mean, the more we can recycle things, the better, but the less waste we produce in the first place is, I think, really the direction we need to head. So I was just wondering if you all could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah. No, I think you make a great point there, we're actually close to wrapping up a zero waste plan update for the city of Austin. And that's been a really key vision and perspective for Austin as well as exactly what you just said. Yeah, you want all the materials that's being generated, you want to divert that and the goal is to hopefully reduce material from being generated in the first place, so that you don't have to make a decision about whether it gets landfilled or recycled. That being said, easy for me to say that, but how as complex as our society is and how you make those changes, I think it's important to recognize that that's where kind of the long-term perspective on this plan really comes into place, because that's where you're looking at societal behavior types of change.
So I would just add under the previous plan, which called for education regarding that issue. I know Danielle McClellan and her folks in the zero waste team have worked to do community outreach and education regarding reduced single-use plastics and things of that nature. The city council a few years ago dipped their toe into the issue with single-use plastic bags. This is an issue that really does require a lot of support at the state level. So we hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would just encourage other committee members to make sure that when we're thinking about zero waste, we also think about the production side. I'm also curious about, as we start to electrify and use a lot more batteries, there's going to be a lot more batteries that are being created and they're going to reach end of life. And I'm wondering if there's any consideration around e-recycling or battery recycling. I read something, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago that was saying that like battery recycling could become a really big industry and is really important environmentally, and both in terms of the waste products and also in terms of making sure that we can electrify and use electricity from zero waste sources.
Yeah, no, that's great. A great comment, and makes me wonder if you've been eavesdropping on our discussions about the recycling market development plan, because you're right on it. But in all seriousness, I mean, if you just think about where we are right now from an electrification perspective, we're just probably somewhere at the very beginning stages. And so where are we going to be in all 5 or 10 years? Probably going to have bunches and bunches of batteries that we'll need to figure out what to do with. My understanding is that car batteries can actually be reused for some period of time to more stationary type use. Then eventually those are going to have to be managed. And so that market development plan that referencing is going to a portion of that's focused on batteries. So right now there is nothing in place, and there's only maybe like 1 or 2 facilities across the entire United States. But from an economic development perspective, it's something that could be an opportunity for them. But really ramping up its presence here in Texas, where it could provide the opportunities on the battery front. I would say on that, definitely understand where you're coming from and stay tuned on that perspective.
Awesome. And maybe this is just a request for staff, is to maybe think about how can the city help support some of that battery recycling type work. I'm not sure, and if you have an answer, great, but if not, maybe something to start thinking about.
Armin, is that it then?
Yes, that's all I've got. Thank you.
That's your questions for now? Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
you.
Michael?
Yeah, hey, thanks y'all for giving us this update. Sounds like good plans and go in the right direction. My thing about the private sector and about waste reduction in the first place, to Ehrman's point, is do we have any great examples of companies or industries here that we can point to, shine a light on, to incentivize people that if you eliminate waste in your business, that it's actually really good for business? And I don't know about Dallas and here, but there are really good examples of this in many industries across the country, like textiles and ceramics and other things like that, and electronics. And so let's incentivize people that, waste is bad. It just is. Anybody would say no waste is better than any waste. So let's eliminate it as best we can. Secondly, I think for it to become more premium, your waste is going to become a premium. There's nothing wrong with that. And that will also encourage people, of course. But I think just moreover is, if we have great examples to point to about this is good for business, and you can too in your business, your industry, then we can see corporate adoption of things that just eliminate a lot of the problems you guys have to deal with and the rest of us have to pay with and live with.
Yeah, there are a number of companies that have adopted zero waste policies or strategies. And so I think to highlight some of those within the plan is something that we could certainly do. And I think a question for the city to be thinking about is, from that whole commercial sector, what type of involvement or role, if any, should the city of Dallas have in terms of either encouraging or potentially requiring changes from a diversion perspective. So those will be things that we'll be evaluating as part of the planning effort.
A good example of a manufacturer I wanted to suggest is Anderson Windows. They use 99% of everything that goes into their plant is used or reused. They have been doing this for many, many, many years, and they are recycling vinyl, they're recycling wood, they're recycling sawdust. They do 99% of whatever goes into their plant is reused or and repurposed. So that's a great example of a manufacturer.
Ellen, were you done? Yeah, okay. I had a question probably for Cliff.
Yes, ma'am.
So we had a contract with our MRF in South Dallas whereby it was very favorable to us. They would take our recyclables even if the markets for them were way, way down. Is that contract still in effect, or has it been amended?
It is still in effect. There have been some amendments, and there's Tim to give you the details.
Hi, Ms. Grayson. How are you?
Hi.
So it's still in effect. The only amendment that we have had, I believe you were still on council at the time. It was one amendment that allowed for the vendor, our contractor, to bring in clean material and bill it directly and operate that outside of the scope of the contract, so to speak, in lieu of the host fees. Other than that, there have not been any amendments made. That's not to say that there is not some interest by them to renegotiate the terms of the deal.
I'm sure.
But that has not happened as of yet.
Okay.
I think that's sort of the nicest way I can say that. And Scott, and we've in those discussions, we've been including our consultant Scott and Burns McDonnell have been heavily involved in that as well, guiding us.
So when is the end date of that contract?
I believe there's 13 years left on the contract. It was a fairly long-term agreement where we retain ownership of the property and the building. Scott, you might correct me if I'm wrong there, but I believe there's 13 years left on it. We added a couple of years with the amendment where we allowed them to bring in clean material outside of the host fee.
Right. Yeah, that's correct as you're describing. But then after the initial term, there are, I think it's 2 optional terms. And each one of those can be, I think, for 10 years. So it has the opportunity to go on for a long period of time, but that would be at the city's option, as Tim just described.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. That was information that I was very interested in hearing. Scott, you asked for some stakeholder groups. When you have your community meetings, would you include an organization called the North Dallas Neighborhood Alliance? It is and I can get you some contact information, but It is an umbrella organization of homeowner associations in far north Dallas. And they, I think, would be very interested in participating in some of these meetings, especially your meetings about bulk trash and brush.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
So I, for one, am very interested in seeing the city move forward more quickly on changes to bulk trash and brush. I know they're working on it, and I know they have a very deliberate time frame, but I would like to see them speed that up a little bit. Actually, a lot.
Everyone does. We are working on it. We want to get it taken care of too, because we realize that brush and bulk is on the street for too long in many areas. So there's a lot of.
But I just also think there's real opportunities there to separate out the brush
Absolutely.
from the bulk and get that, recycled into mulch or whatever. And I just think there's opportunities there for us to not only reduce the cost of that to the city for that service, but to just make money off of that service and just kind of improve the service for the public in general.
Yeah, Ms. Grayson, on the part about diverting that material, a key to really helping to increase the city's recycling rate on the residential side is to do just that, to separate the brush from the bulk, because then, as you were mentioning, that's when that organic material can then be mulched or
Right, because right now it gets contaminated because it all gets thrown together. So, and I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry, Scott.
No, I was just saying exactly.
I mean, I know that we had made some ambitious recommendations in terms of timeframes, but I know the city is taking a more deliberative approach, kind of introducing one portion of the plan and then seeing how it works, and then going to the next portion of the plan related to bulk trash and brush. So just kind of think we'd try to look up and speed up the time frame a little bit.
Ms. Grayson, you hit the nail on the head there. We took a phased approach is what finally allowed us to get one step across the finish line instead of going full-fledged. I think you were around for that success as well, but you're exactly right. The phased approach is what we're taking, and that next step does include a separation from the bulk and the brush. It's our biggest win opportunity with our diversion goals. And I will tell you, just from your experience, you would know that part of our difficulty and what we're trying to maneuver through is the idea that we're reducing services because we may not be collecting as often as we are now, which, as you know, is almost a free for all. We're there every month and we collect almost everything you put out. And so to reel that back in, we're going to have to put even more limits, better separations. And it's just a strategy that we've are pushing through. And I'm sure you're well aware of those difficulties that we've seen with that.
I am. How is the part going now that we phased in first, which is limiting the volumes? How is that going? Are there a lot of citations being given? Is it not necessary because people are obeying the volume limits? How is that going?
So I think it's going very well. We haven't seen a lot of as we described whenever it passed, I think it suited 95% of all of the set outs or somewhere in that range. So there's that 5% that go above the 10 cubic yard limit, which is what we said, what we set, what you guys agreed to. So it's going really well. I think we're far enough along into that it's time for the next step, which would, in our mind, be the separation. And so we're developing that plan to take to council, along with support in this solid waste management plan that will help sort of guide us down that path. Cliff can probably speak more to the citations. Cliff, I'm not asking for a specific number or anything like that, but I know he follows it very closely to see how many records that our drivers create of piles that were either larger than they were supposed to be or out of some level of compliance.
And I don't have an exact number either, but just a minor point. The council was specific that they wanted this to be an administrative fee when the change was done rather than a citation. So we, rather than a citation being issued, when we measure, if it's over the 10 cubic yards, we post a charge to the customer's water bill for the time and effort to collect it.
You're right. You jogged my memory. Instead of having a citation, it was like we just automatically billed their account for the overage.
Right. That's not to say that that the city could not issue a citation. And there's been a handful of egregious cases where, in addition to a collection fee, code compliance has issued a citation. So that does happen from time to time, but that was not the intent of it as well.
Well, thank you guys for all that information. I see some other hands up. I have bunches of questions, but I'm gonna stop now. Tracy, I think your hand is up.
Thank you. So I just want to bring to mind for all of us that equity is a part of all of the CCAP. And when I drive through South Dallas Fair Park area, I do see bulk trash sitting for what seems like longer periods of time than it sits in my neighborhood. Can I hear about any efforts that there are to make sure that it's a timely process in every area? Do we see problems with that? Does anybody else see problems with that besides me?
I can tell you, Tracy, I live in far north Dallas and our trash can sit out there for just short of 2 weeks. So it isn't just it's all over the city.
And I would say it's a combination of factors. It is oftentimes that sanitation is running behind, and that can be due to a number of factors, whether it's seasonal. Spring, we're just hitting springtime now, and we're seeing a lot more brush than we were in the past few months. So that slows us down. There's a number of other factors, including following a fifth Monday week of the month where everybody gets
confused.
They get confused and they set it out early. So there's times like that, and then it becomes sort of a code compliance issue where we're talking to code compliance, several times a week, trying to make sure that they know where we are, and that, whether we're running behind or if a neighborhood or somebody has set out their bulk trash early. And what we often see is once one person on a block sets their brush and bulk out early, people see it and go, "Ooh, it's time." and then the longer it sits out, the more and more gets added. So I would completely agree. There are certain neighborhoods that are historically underserved or hard to reach, where this problem is more prevalent, and so we have to do more work and on how we communicate with those communities. So that's a big part of this plan update.
Okay, I'd like to follow up. Hard to reach, I don't really understand because everybody has an address. And I guess I'm just curious about, is there publicly available data on how quickly bulky trash pickup is done in zip codes?
I would say we have the rough data. Have we analyzed it to determine whether we're picking up certain neighborhoods faster than others? We have not, but that's something that we're certainly open to looking at and identifying where we may be failing those neighborhoods if we are, and how we can improve it.
If we really put our money where our mouth is on equity, that type of analysis has to be done. Thank you.
Absolutely, we agree.
Thank you, Tracy. Alan, I see your hand up again. There's another hand here that doesn't have any identifying. I don't know whose it is. but it looks like maybe Michael again. Alan, go ahead.
Sure.
You're up.
Yeah, I have a question with regard to, I know you're developing the plan for the separation. We just had bulky trash in our neighborhood, and just to note, I mean, metallic items last less than 12 hours out front because there's private individuals that are collecting steel for recycling on their own. So I'm just curious what the target's going to be, because a lot of the metal and things that are valuable for recycling don't last, and I don't know if that's something we're tracking. Maybe we're talking about separation of less desirable items like mattresses or things like that. So
Yeah, for the brush and bulky, if that's what you're speaking to, Mr. Hoffman, there is primarily, at least initially, looking at the diversion of the brush to separate that out from the bulk, and so to be able to compost or mulch that part of it. I think future considerations or evaluations could be done on the bulk side of it, but now you're talking about things like furniture, and as you said, oftentimes metal or other appliances are going to get scavenged. So it's pretty rare that whether it's Dallas or another city actually pick up appliances. So a lot of times that material that is truly bulk isn't going to be that divertible or recyclable, and it can depend on the material types. Because hopefully, if you have furniture that can be reused, you're going to either sell it or take it to a Goodwill or have somebody like that come and pick it up. But it's really just that the organic part of the brush.
So nothing like e-waste or anything like that. So
Well, that e-waste shouldn't
be put out there. Yeah.
Shouldn't be out there.
As part of that particular program, and there are other programs in place for the diversion of whether it's household hazardous waste or e-waste type materials.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Michael, did you have your hand up?
No, I
guess
just
not.
took it down. I'd left it. I apologize. I should have dropped it earlier. Thank you. I chatted some stuff. We're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And maybe, I know my last question, on the commercial recycling, I've heard a lot of interest in making sure that the city really moves forward on trying to get more commercial recycling. Where are we on that? I know it's a difficult area because there are so many different types of businesses. But are we making any progress on moving toward getting a higher percentage of commercial recycling?
So Sue or Danielle maybe, or Tim best suited to speak to that. Tim, you're muted, I think.
Got me. I was hoping to make it through a full meeting without that mute speak, but it didn't happen. I was just saying that Danielle may be better suited. We sometimes call that universal recycling, commercial recycling, and I know it's definitely an aspect of this plan that is going to be updated. It's been discussed, as you said, many times. Multifamily recycling went into effect recently. It's a step in that right direction, and I know we're hoping to, with Danielle and Sue's team, build off of that multifamily recycling into a universal recycling ordinance that includes commercial recycling, as you said. I don't have a great timeline for you, but I would ask Danielle if you've got anything, or Sue if you've got any update to that as far as your plans go. I welcome your input.
I was waiting on Sue to unmic. I think this is the question no one really wants to answer. But I'll take a stab at it. And Sue, if I go too far down a path, please mute me and stop me from talking. I believe that we are looking to the council for direction on a specific policy regarding any mandate. The way the plan is currently written, and I know that it's being updated by sanitation and the very capable folks at Burns and Mac with community input, but the way the plan is written now is that it is it's a voluntary effort with review for a possible mandate. As the council did a couple of years ago, the multifamily aspect of that was also
Voluntary, yeah.
program with a review for possible mandate. And at the time of its adoption, the council did determine to mandate multifamily recycling for a number of reasons that Ms. Grayson, I know you're well versed in and can speak to.
Yes.
But predominantly being, we did have the capability for enforcement under the city's multifamily permitting system. We also had a need to address the ability for residents to be able to recycle where they live. At that time, we noted that a large percentage of Dallas residents could not recycle at home. And while the city offered recycling collection services for its customers, that was just not available for roughly 50 to 60% of Dallas residents. And so at that time, the analysis was done that there are a number of companies that do offer access to recycling in their industry. And so we're looking to find out through the update to the local solid waste management plan, kind of what is the trend and was Dallas ready, politically ready to take on commercial recycling.
Okay, so if you're going to go to the council and ask them, is it time to stop trying to do it voluntarily and move more toward a mandate, which is actually how we got the multifamily done? What is the timeline for that? Are you thinking of going to council sometime this year?
Can I dive in here a little bit and do
Yeah.
some explaining, if you will? And this will probably be more formalized in the update to the local solid waste management plan. We're looking at where we can get the most bang for the buck. And with 58% of Dallas residents living in multifamily, getting that in place initially was critically important. Then we look at 40% of our waste stream being organics, be it food or wood waste. That's a pretty good chunk that if we can get that out of that waste stream going to the environment, we can see some significant improvement in overall diversion. When we talk to our friends in the business community, a lot of them are recycling anyway, but it's not on our radar because they're recycling privately and brokering their own materials. And so we don't necessarily, it's not that we don't have commercial recycling, it's that we don't have good documentation of that portion of our overall waste that is being recycled already, and it's just off our radar. And so that's it. So it's a little bit more complex than just writing a rule that says you have to do commercial recycling. The other thing is that we're learning, it's in the lessons learned from the multifamily recycling ordinance. We have 2,500 complexes that are subject to that multifamily recycling ordinance. That's one land use type and one general stream. Commercial properties have about 30 or 40, depending on what their business is. It's not as easy to just say you have to do this. It could be food, it could be paper, it could be electronics, it could be a mixture or all or none of the above. And so it's not as clear cut as the multifamily. I also know that we have had to do a significant amount of one-on-one outreach and engagement with those 2,500 facilities to get them into compliance. And so when we look at the number of businesses and different types of businesses across Dallas, that's a lot bigger effort. That said, one of our speakers this morning was from AT&T. They have reached out to the city to see about setting up a zero waste zone downtown. We've kind of halted that with COVID because nobody's downtown right now, but there is some movement on looking at different ways of encouraging commercial recycling. But right now, the biggest chunk of waste that we can easily get or more easily get and divert it from the landfill is in that organic sector. Tim or Danielle, did I get too far over my skis? Okay, I'll shut up then. Did I answer the question?
Well, you
Yes.
certainly gave us a lot of background material that even I was unaware of some of that, especially I didn't hear AT&T, so I think that's a big step in the right direction. So good. I appreciate all the information. Thank you. We had some more questions. We had one from Maria, followed by Jeanette.
Yes, and I want to congratulate the city of Dallas because zero waste is the way to go. And I know they make a lot of fun, but what zero wasters say, it's zero waste or very darn close to it. And there are cities that have done it. So my question goes to those other 12 categories of recycled materials, glass and whatever, concrete. And, I've seen some cities, especially in the West Coast, that they have a facility where the citizen can drop off their concrete or their glass, whatever, cloth, carpets. I had heard that in the McBluff landfill, there was a building there where you do training, but there's also a lot of land where at one point they were thinking of doing something like that, a place where the citizen can go and there's the 12 categories and they leave stuff there. I wanted to know if that had gone in place. And then the other is there are cities like Denton that are collecting organics from residentials. And it's a business. So has that been thought out? Because I think getting the organics out of the waste is huge.
Scott or
Yeah.
Cliff?
So I think those are, you listed off a number of important topics that we will be evaluating with the city as part of the planning process. So what you just mentioned in terms of drop-off locations for, say, the harder to recycle types of materials, we'll be evaluating that on multiple fronts. One will be, I mentioned earlier, from a also hazardous material type perspective, where the city is part of the Dallas County program. It has some periodic collection event. We'll be evaluating, is that an ideal approach to take or not. In the future, we're also going to be evaluating more drop-off options made available specifically at McComas Bluff for both disposal as well as for conversion purposes. And then you also mentioned, what about food waste? So Eric, who's on the line, he actually led our efforts for at regional level for the North Central Texas COG. We did several years of waste recycling certification work, including material from the city of Dallas. And also, as Grace said earlier, the organics, said earlier, organic is a huge part of that waste stream. And so, I think as we work with the city, we want to take that, continue with that kind of deliberate type of an approach to say, we're going to first look at converting the brush material. You got to figure out where's that going to go long term. Here to look at, well, for that facility, then we take on the food scraps and to evaluate how can the city then look at providing programs for food scraps at the residential or commercial side. So I say these as things that will be evaluated as part of the planning effort. And it'll be up to the city to really decide whether they potentially fit in with what you want, how you're going.
Thank you, Scott. Maria, did you have anything else?
I think, yeah, I do have something else.
Okay.
I think it's very, waste is something people don't like to think about. It's like ookie or whatever, but I think we need a campaign for the leaders, community leaders and politicians as well, of the importance of doing waste management and remembering that recycling is the third R. We first have to reduce waste by not buying so much junk. Then we have to reuse it. And that's why these Smurfs that are going around the world they reuse everything. And then the third one is the recycling. But people think they're very sustainable because they recycle, and actually of the management of waste, that's the worst option. It's best to reduce what you're purchasing and reuse. So I really believe in an education campaign, and I think a lot of the components of this plan need to have that education. And I went to the city of Curitiba in Brazil, and I saw how they get tokens of transportation to get on the transportation system, where in the slums that were these hills, children would come down with the bags of waste, and they would be compensated with transportation. So this can be done, but it education and promotion and marketing.
Thank you, Maria. That was really interesting, that example in Brazil, kind of putting two needs together. Jeanette?
Yeah, I wrote it in there, but typically there's a lot of underestimation of wood waste in the stream. And especially with tornadoes and kind of some of the weather we're going to get, plus emerald ash borer, there's going to be probably more than double wood waste, and it would be a shame just to compost or get rid of it. But my question, I guess, is there any way to offer any kind of incentives for new enterprise to start businesses with the city to begin to look at, especially wood waste, furniture building, or some recycled use for those materials?
Yes, I think that can fit in from the overall economic development aspects of the planning effort. But I think that, when we're talking about the organic fraction of the waste stream, typically that's going to be brush, yard waste, food. So that type of material, we would look for that to be composted or mulched. But if it is, say, already existing wood furniture or what have you, that's material that hopefully could be, continue to be reused and have a continued life as a piece of wood furniture.
So we would be looking at something like that as part of this plan update.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I don't see any more hands up. So I think we will move on, but this was a lot of great information. Thank you all so much for coming and talking to the task force members about this. And we will look forward to seeing this plan move forward, this update. Like I said, I probably have 30 more questions I could ask you, but we won't do that. I'll wait until the community meetings. So thank you all very much for being here today and sharing this plan with us. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Cliff. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
You.
Great rest of your day.
Just welcome.
Thank you. You too. So let's move on now to the buildings and energy section of the CCAP. And if we don't finish this today, we're going to put it back on. I don't think we will. It's so large and it's got just a lot of meat to it. So we will put this on next month's agenda. So don't feel, task force members, like you have to rush through this and get done by 3 o'clock, because whatever point we're at, we'll just put it back on the agenda for our May meeting. So we will start with a briefing by Far Andrews and Katie Evans from OEQS.
Okay, well, good afternoon, task force members. I guess we'll just jump right in. Today, we're going to do a deep dive on the buildings and energy sector of the CCAP plan. As you know, the buildings and energy, buildings and energy are combined in the inventory, but they're separated in the CCAP plan because of the different scales of the actions. The building sector focuses on energy used in the building envelope, whereas the energy sector actions focuses on the way electricity is generated. Okay, so let's dive in. Next slide. So goal number 1, which is our building sector. The goal is Dallas's buildings are energy efficient and climate resilient. So how do we plan to accomplish this? Next slide. So what the CCAP proposes in its 3 objectives. The first objective here is we look at our existing building stock and see how we can be more energy efficient, how we can use less resources is really the key, which means weatherization, which means technology solutions, which means more efficient equipment. The second objective here really forces us to look at our new building stock and how buildings are being constructed and how we can implement more green building concepts into this process. The third objective in the CCAP plan in the building sector is where we take a look at all of our building stock through the lens of resiliency. With the understanding that we are expecting more extreme weather events now, what do we need to do to reduce the impact on our infrastructure and prepare and be better prepared for these events? Next slide, please. So why is this important? So the building sector is responsible for a huge chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions. This was revealed in our most recent inventory, and it seems to be pretty standard nationwide for municipalities. Our building stock is very vulnerable to extreme weather. It increases in heat, increase the demand for air conditioning, and therefore increase the cost of energy utilities in the building. Increased heat also threatens building foundations due to soil shrinkage. Increased flooding can cause physical damage and impede access to the buildings. So lots of vulnerabilities there. The majority of these emissions come from the commercial sector, which is 33% of this entire sector. Another 20% comes from homes. So the CCAPs, we're being very sensitive to the fact that higher utility bills relating from rising temperatures are also increasing the energy burden for our vulnerable communities. So you'll also see actions in the CCAP plan where we highlight equity as a key factor. Next slide. Oh, so this is where I turn it over to Katie to talk to you about what's in our work plan.
Thank you, FAR. And so FAR's already talked about, of course, the background and the objectives within the CCAP. I'm going to talk briefly about what we have in our work plan for this year. As you all know, in our work plan for fiscal year 2021, we included 136 milestones from 48 actions. So in the building sector, we've chosen, I believe it's 6 actions to begin working on this year. And we've divided those up into the milestones you see before you and on the next slide as well. And so what you see, the in progress and complete and the status that you'll see in the 3rd column, that is of first quarter. So briefly going over this, we're looking at action B1, which is demonstrating a leadership in developing a carbon neutrality plan for municipal operations. And this has to do with our energy benchmarking for city facilities and looking at opportunities to reduce energy consumption in city facilities. Additionally, looking at the potential for on-site generation through solar panels. We have some exciting projects coming down the line in terms of renewable generation on city facilities. This also includes our airport accreditation at Love Field Airport, as well as DFW. So we have met both of these targets and milestones for the airport accreditation. And in fact, DFW Airport does have level 4, I believe it has level 4 carbon accreditation at this point. And then the rest of our milestones, we're looking at expanding PACE, the participation PACE financing, which is in progress. And in Q2, we did close one more PACE deal in the city of Dallas. And again, those Q2 reports will be available publicly and on our dashboard. by next week. We did receive those last week and we're processing those now. We are also looking at increasing the scope. I know there was some conversation about the Green Business Certification Program. We are currently working with sanitation and our zero waste team to look at expanding participation and the scope of that program and working with the Chambers of Commerce. So we have started on that process as well. We are also participating in the regional building code updates. I know there's been a lot of interest in the building code updates. We spoke yesterday with some of our building officials to make sure that we are active participants in the regional process, and we anticipate that the City of Dallas code process, the update process, will be complete by the end of 2022. It does take some time to get through that process at the regional level and then to do the amendment process at the city level. And then we're looking at the potential for city-owned properties for the creation of resilience hubs. This part of the process is kind of just evaluating them, evaluating city facilities for potential. We know that this is a timely consideration given what we saw during the winter storms in February. And that is everything for buildings for this year's work plan in terms of milestones. But just as a side note, we could not do this without our partners in other city departments, including building services, aviation, bond, housing, economic development, and sustainable development. We're working very closely with all of these city departments to make sure that we can implement these milestones as they're listed in our work plan. And I know that was a lot of information. As a reminder, the work plan is available online, and I believe you have all received a copy. I'll link to it as well in the chat in case there was something that you couldn't read or that you missed. And I'll turn it back over to Far.
So we had originally planned to walk through the building sector and then take questions, and then walk through the energy sector and take questions. But I think because maybe we're short on time and we'd have a natural break at energy, maybe we should start the discussion on the building section at this time. What do you think, Ms. Grayson?
Yes, let's do that. Let's take the questions on what we've heard so far. And then, like I said, we don't have to feel rushed. We can do this next month also. So let's do that split and take the questions on what we've heard so far. And the first one up is Alan.
Hello, thank you for being here today. I had a question with regard to the built environment and residential construction. Do you have some of the details with regard to what the plan is there? Because with the existing built environment and residential, there are some opportunities that are pretty low hanging fruit. And we've discussed this early on when the CCAP was initiated with regard to radiant barriers, with regard to incentivizing homeowners to do a radiant barrier to reduce CO2 generation, reduce attic temperatures, and the way to achieve that would be basically, and I know the building department would love to share this, but we would need to get permits for roofs, and but that could be handled with a third party, much the same way we do with the green evaluation, because there is a green aspect to a roof replacement. If someone is going to replace a roof and they don't have a radiant barrier, or if they have to redeck their roof, I say that we can get thermal plywood right now, but we can't. It's not available. So the only availability is right now is spray-on radiant barriers, which are effective. And that's really something that could really reduce CO2 in a big way in the built environment. And whenever we have a hailstorm, we have over the course of 15 years, probably most of the roofs in Dallas get replaced because of hail. And that is something that in 15 years, you could have every roof in the city of Dallas with a radiant barrier if we implemented this, which would be a material difference in terms of energy consumption and reduction of CO2. That is the biggest piece of low-hanging fruit we've got. And it would be a third-party inspection required, which could be done by an energy rater which we already do currently. All of our insulation inspections and third-party energy inspections are done by third-party inspectors. So this would not be an additional burden necessarily to the building department other than the issuance of the permit, which right now is a challenge too. But it might be something that would be, maybe we can do an online permit that would be, but the best part about this is that the vendors that are going to be doing the roofs would have to be registered contractors in the city of Dallas, which would be very important because, you know, we get the carpetbagger contractors that show up every time we have a hailstorm, and there's a lot of people that get taken. So there's two benefits of this. One, in a 15-year cycle, maybe reducing CO2 in a huge way by making sure every rooftop, single family rooftop has a radiant barrier in the course of 15 years. That would be a very, very huge reduction of carbon. So that's a big low-hanging fruit, and I wanted to see if there were anything else that you had in mind for the existing built environment. Thank you.
So would that be possible? You know, the building codes group is starting to meet or is already meeting. And I know, Alan, you had expressed an interest at one time in being part of that subcommittee. Yeah. So would that be a possibility to add that to the building code as it's being discussed out in Arlington?
In terms of, well, the code is already there, and that's where a lot of builders on the new build side achieve and get to the air exchange requirement of 4. It's one of the pieces of the prescriptive process to get to a very high score on the energy performance. And so the radiant barrier is already in the code. This would just be something that we would need as a city to implement as an ordinance that said, if you are going to replace your roof, you need to have an inspection. Because right now, if somebody has a new roof put on their home, they don't have to have an inspection. That's considered a repair. And so as a result of that, by getting a permit to get the roof, and it should be really a very, very simple process. It should be an online permit, but in the context that there's going to be a third-party inspection required, and as part of that roof process, you have to put in a radiant barrier. Now, for the equity portion, we should allow for, and this is not an expensive item to do. And especially if someone's redecking their roof, it's not necessarily an expensive item to get a radiant barrier or piece of plywood on that roof rather than a plain piece of plywood. We're talking dollars, you know, a fractional percentage. But the reality is that is something that would have to be by ordinance of the city council saying, look, we're going to require permits for roofs, and as part of a re-roof, we want to know if you already have a radiant barrier, we're not going to require you to do anything other than replace your roof. If you don't have a radiant barrier, here's what you need to do in order as part of your roof process. And it's just much the same when you're doing a remodel. If you go in and you're doing an extensive remodel of a home, you have to upgrade your electrical. Well, with regard to roof, it's not a huge deal if they're redecking. It is somewhat of a deal to go ahead and spray on, but it's still really possible. There are contractors all over the city that can do that. And so as far as equity would go, for addressing the lower income problem, there's got to be community block grants. There's got to be money available, even at a federal level, especially with what's coming down the pike right now from the federal government. I really think that we really need to offer credits or grants for people that are in this circumstance where they can't afford to do that and they're needing to re-roof their home.
So Sue, what would be the next step if this task force decided they would like to see that go forward? Like try and get the city to adopt that. What would be the next step for Alan's idea?
I think that the appropriate next step would to get the proponents off of our task force with the building official and his staff that are working on code updates. I will say that the city of Austin just posted their recommended updates. I think their deadline for comments was yesterday. I downloaded them all, both residential and commercial, so that I could look and see what they were doing as kind of a starting point for us, and I have sent that over to our building folks, but I would, and I'm happy to convene such a meeting. I would suggest a meeting with our task force members with an interest in the building official. It's David Session. I think you probably know him.
I do.
And some of his staff would probably be the most productive way of getting that into the conversation, at least for consideration. I think what you're proposing is very reasonable, but it's definitely well out of my lane, but I'm happy to get it into the right lane for that conversation, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, it would be great. And I think it could come from this committee and it might spur the action. The reality is that as far as I know, in the entire existing built environment, I don't know of anything that would be cheaper to reduce carbon than doing a radiant barrier in every rooftop of the city.
So I think that, that's a good idea, Alan. I haven't heard anyone on the task force not be supportive of that. And I remember when you brought it up the first time, we had a number of comments in favor of it. And so I think the next thing to do would just be what Sue suggested, and actually get going with it in terms of setting up a conversation with David Sessions or anybody that you need to talk to. So Sue said she'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, just let me know who all wants to participate in that meeting, and I'm happy to get it set up.
Yeah, task force members, please let Sue know, and if you can let her know right now, that would be great.
And I would ask Tony. You would be great too. You know what I'm talking about, and Michael. Yeah.
So let's say so far, Alan, Tony, and Michael, Sue, and then anybody else, please let Sue know, get in touch with her, call her, text her, whatever, and let her know that you want to be on this, because my thinking is that Sue has said she will do this, and let's get it done like sooner rather than later. Okay, so like by next meeting, we could have a report on who all talked to who all and where you are on this. Okay.
The positive outcome from this would be huge. Just think 15 to 20 years, we would have radiant barriers with a huge footprint reduction. That would be easy. And that's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah, and it's also great because you've said within 15 years, and that's a goal. That's a timeline that you think actually with the turnover of roofs and with the weather and stuff can be doable. So I think that's helpful.
Almost guaranteed with our increased weathers, with our storms that are coming. Yes.
That's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. So,
Maybe 5.
Bad thing,
possibly
bad thing
5.
I hope not. Okay, thank you, Alan. So Michael, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, just kind of building upon that, and why I think the conversation can be broadened with the building crew as recommended by Sue, is obviously, and these are definitely, that's the low hanging fruit. That is absolutely true, all these efficiency measures. Then in addition to that, the question is, what does the city want to do to encourage, promote, and help people get more rooftop solar deployed on quality roofs? So that also goes hand in glove, because the worst thing you can do is put solar on a bad roof, because that's just going to create future serious problems. So they go hand in glove. Now, the difference, of course, is a solar project is a much more expensive proposition. However, there's ways to finance it where it isn't on a cash flow annual basis. And, cities in different parts of the country or state level, I guess, California said all new homes must have solar. I think that's well known by everybody. So these are just the kind of things I think to also have in this conversation. What can we do? What should we do? How could we do things of that sort, both at a residential, commercial level? And boy, the exacerbation from 2 months ago is now here. We have all the rationale. And it has to include equity, because so many of the deaths that occurred in homes that were, I'm assuming, were in under-resourced communities and were not that protective of the weather. They need to be. And additionally, all of this leads to reducing grid reliance. And we take the pressure off the grid, then the statistics of how bad and the impact on individuals is going to go down, because we distribute power generation. So I think it all dovetails into Alan's point. It's just extending it in the generation side. So I would love to have that role in the discussion with the building folks as well.
And because you're going to be on this subcommittee, you have an opportunity to bring that up to them at the time this is all being discussed.
Right.
Because Doesn't it kind of sound now, right now, like the city is mainly looking at solar for their own facilities?
Actually, no.
No? Okay.
Actually, we're working right now, and Katie and I were just kind of texting each other to see if we should fess up on this or not. We're working with our housing department to include solar into our affordable housing program. The first project is with St. Phillips, and it's a relatively small project, but I think it will have huge impact, and we're really pretty excited about it. We're also looking at a project on the landfill, more as a subscription-based community solar under that type of model. So we have some things in the pipeline. They're not quite ready to bring forward because they're still in development. I'm very excited about the program with housing, though. I will tell you that.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm glad you decided to share.
Well, it's just it's in process. It hasn't gone to council, hasn't been approved, etc. And so I didn't want to jinx us on it. But it's a fantastic potential to make really a big impact. And granted, it's a small project that we're starting with, but we're trying to do it as a revolving loan program so that as people pay what they can, it goes back into the program and we can extend it to other homes. And the other thing is it's relatively new roofs, so we're not as worried about older housing stock that may not have the structural capacity or the roof that would support solar. So yeah, so that's something that Katie's been working on for a little bit, and we finally are kind of making something that I think is going to be one of those projects that will have significant impact. I also like that it's at St. Phillips, which is a fairly visible community, and so the word will get out to other communities about it.
Well, that really sounds good. That does. And I'm glad to hear that because now we know it's being extended out beyond city facilities, that you're looking, at residential.
Yeah.
Good. Tracy, you're up next.
Thank you, Ms. Grayson. And that is such exciting news, Katie and Sue. That is so exciting. And one thing that we do with Solar United Neighbors, for example, is require the contractor, require it through their RFP to use a low-income, a neighbor from the low-income community who's been trained to do residential installation through Green Careers Dallas to be able to get a job with that solar contractor. And I know I'm a broken record on this, but any headway with DHA properties and solar on DHA properties?
We're still working on that opportunity.
Thank you.
And Michael just asked the same question. We're in conversation with them. We've gotten a lot farther with our own housing program.
Yeah, that is so excellent. This is the magic of the CCAP, in my opinion. And Sue, your leadership, and Sandy, is that this is such an opportunity for all city offices to work together. Y'all are making it happen. It's not a theory that, there's not just a bunch of plans sitting on the shelf. It's coming together, and it's all thanks to your leadership. And I think that the biggest thing with DHA will be the economic benefits to them for going solar. It's a big win for them economically on savings.
Excellent. And I hope that happens sooner than, because it seems it's taking a while.
It does take a while. It's one of those things. I have a really lovely Oak Cliff home, and when we were talking with the folks at St. Phillips, they wanted to know what it would look like, and so we sent over the pictures of my Oak Cliff home with solar on it, so that because it's different than when you look at a really snazzy North Dallas fancy home that with panels. It's really hard to relate to what it would look like in Oak Cliff or South Dallas. And so we sent some pictures over so they could see what it looks like on a little, modest sized home. And so I think that helped, because then they would like, oh, it's not really that ugly. Oh, yeah. So we're cautiously optimistic. I hope I didn't jinx it by letting you guys know that it's something we're working on, and it isn't a done deal yet, but I feel really hopeful about it.
Well, tell them we all like it. We think it's a great idea.
Okay.
And yeah, I hope you didn't jinx it that I talked you into saying it, but okay. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'm wondering if we ought to get into the energy portion, or should we not? Probably it would be better to be briefed on it at the same time we have questions, rather than be briefed on it today and then move the questions to next month. What do y'all think?
I would wait. It's Rita.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's better to have the briefing and then have the questions at the same time. So does anybody have a concern about that? Seeing none, I think we'll go ahead and do that. We will do the energy portion next month with the Q&A, and then the other things that will be on the agenda, including we have talked Rita into giving us a legislative update on all these things that are going on in Austin related to the environment. And so
You better tell me how long you want it, because it could go on and on.
Well, let's see how much we have on our agenda. We know we're going to have the energy portion of the CCAP next month, but let's see what else comes up. And if we have enough time, we will let you go on and on and on, because I know you have a lot that you're trying to follow down there. And we sure appreciate all the work you're doing. So,
one thing we tentatively had on the agenda for next month, and I don't know if y'all would be interested in it or not, but we are planning a presentation to Dallas City Council to brief on progress on the CCAP since last year at about this time. And I didn't know if that is something that would be of interest to the task force in maybe a dry run before we present it to council.
I'd like to hear it. Is there anybody here who has, feels like we don't need to hear that? I mean, I think this would be interesting to see all the progress that's been made since we started meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that we're currently working on is our work plan and budget for next year. And so I would solicit ideas related to that as well, and just send it to me by email, or we can talk about it at that next meeting. But I know those budget talks are ongoing right now.
So let's have some discussion about it. And if anybody wants to submit ideas between now and then, but certainly I think we'd probably be more able to give you our ideas after we hear the briefing. Jeanette?
I have a question, but it's about, I wanted to get back to Rita before we close.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Well, there's some pretty sensitive House bills, I think, than in Senate bills right now. And Rita, I've been tracking the HB 3519. Are there any other bills in Austin that we need to be addressing ASAP? Because a month from now some of these things are gonna be passed, and this one is in direct relation to the ETJs and opening up for development. And it's a real problem, and this is especially in San Antonio, but now that it's passed, it could probably be used anywhere. So I'm just asking Rita, what is really time sensitive besides this one that she knows of? And could she maybe send us out a notice or something?
I think what would be best, Jeanette, because there's so many bills. Also, there are some bills that for instance, Birdwell has a bill that would affect climate plans, and there's some other bills that would affect the climate plan. There's 5 concrete batch plant and crushing bills that are good up on Monday. It might be best that I create a short list. I don't follow all the environmental bills. I'm kind of tasked with a certain niche, but I'm on calls every Friday morning with all the environmental groups about bills. It might be best that I send folks a notice of some of those bills and where they are, because bills are falling out of the sky like rain at this point. And if they're not passed out of the House committees by May 12th, they're dead. So that might be the best way for me to inform folks.
Well, this one that I have, it's passed the House, it's to the Senate now, and it's not a good one. It really will affect water quality, I think. And I'll send you this one so you can see it, and maybe you can add it to the list.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, Sandy. I was just, these are really timely, and I'm trying to get some letters off to our to Royce West, to Senator West, and it's the same thing. I wrote the same letter in 2011.
10 years ago. 10 years ago.
Jeanette, please send me your letter along with it. There are so many bills out there, guys. There are bills to tie up city ordinances with what we call paralysis by analysis bills. You know, bogging down ordinances in cost evaluations and analysis and all sorts of nonsense. I will try and not make this list too long and do it by category, but Jeanette, get me that one and I'll put a few of them on here. I actually have calls every Saturday on bills, and right now my bill crew has 7 pages, but I follow about 348 bills.
Oh my gosh. That's a lot.
But anyway, yeah, Jeanette, get that to me and I'll get folks an abbreviated version.
Okay, I will.
Well, we really appreciate that, Rita. I know that you're so busy, but it's like critical time right now.
Well, I know Susan gets stuff from me on a regular basis.
Thank you for calling Georgia.
Yeah. I always love a good read.
Could somebody turn their mic off? Thank you. Okay.
I will note for the crew that Rita sent over a note on several batch plant related bills and has asked us to help with testimony for Monday. So we'll be working on that as well.
But for a change, those are good things. Those are good bills and not bad bills. Yeah.
Right.
How does CCAP kind of capture some of the policy stuff that needs to get done? Can our committee anyway work towards policy? Can there be a policy committee? It seems to me that if we're going to get ahead of some of these things, we've got to get ahead of the policy.
So we could form that, Jeanette. We could certainly have a policy subcommittee. Are you thinking mainly right now, immediately?
No, not necessarily. We'll have to kind of pick and choose right now because they're already in process. But it seems to me that if we're going to get into kind of really making big changes, it's got to come through policy, both at the state and city levels. And so, you know, we probably need to at least consider a policy committee. I would be glad to serve on the policy committee if Rita does.
Sure.
I also think, excuse me, I also think a policy committee of some kind is going to be really important on the Permanent Environmental Commission because you're right, you have to impact policy and get it up front the way you want it. And then that helps fend off a lot of bad things. So, yeah, I agree. So I'll talk to Sue about that and we'll see if we can't get that off the ground.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions or concerns before we adjourn? Seeing none, can I hear a motion to adjourn, please?
I move we adjourn. This is Tracy.
Tracy, and is there a second?
This is Pam. I second it.
Pam? Okay, thank you. There's a motion and a second, and we will be adjourned at 2:55 PM. Thank you, task force members.
Bye, everybody. Everybody take
Have a
care.
good